Let's start today with a question that most people designing courses almost never ask. Not what content should I include, not even what activities should students complete, but something deeper. What change do I actually expect this course to produce in the world? Because if we think about education for sustainable development, the purpose of learning is not simply knowledge acquisition. The purpose is transformation in thinking, in practice, and ultimately in the system people participate in. And this is where the idea of theory of change becomes very useful. A theory of change is essentially a way of explaining how we believe change will happen. It is a way of mapping the pathway from learning to action, and from action to broader social or environmental change. In development practice, a theory of change is often described as a kind of roadmap. It shows how we move from where we are now to where we want to be. But what makes it interesting for digital learning is that it forces us to think carefully about the relationship between learning and change. Because taking a course does not automatically change anything. People may complete a course, they may pass a quiz, they may even receive a certificate. But that does not necessarily mean that anything has changed in their teaching practice, their professional behavior, or the communities they work in. So when we design digital courses for sustainability, whether for teachers, community leaders, farmers, or professionals, we need to ask a much more fundamental question. How will this course contribute to real change? And that is exactly what a theory of change helps us clarify. Instead of starting with activities or modules, a theory of change begins with something else. It begins with a long-term vision of success. In other words, we start by asking, if this course were truly successful, what would be different in 5 or 10 years? For example, imagine we are designing a digital course for teachers on sustainability education. Our long-term vision might not be teachers complete the course. That's not really change. Instead, the vision might be something like this. Teachers confidently integrate sustainability issues into their teaching, and learners develop the ability to understand and address environmental challenges in their communities. Now, notice what has happened here. We have moved from course completion to educational transformation. And once we have that vision, the next step is to ask, what must happen before that vision becomes possible? In the theory of change literature, these are often called preconditions or pathways of change. These are the steps that need to occur before the long-term outcome becomes achievable. For example, if teachers are going to integrate sustainability into their teaching, several things probably need to happen first. Teachers need to understand sustainability concepts. They need confidence in facilitating discussion. They need access to relevant teaching materials. They may need to collaborate with other educators, and they may need support from school leadership or policy frameworks. Each of these becomes part of the change pathway. In other words, a theory of change helps us identify the intermediate outcomes that connect learning with transformation. And this is where it becomes particularly powerful for digital course design, because it encourages us to think of a course not as a container of information, but as part of a larger change process. A well-designed digital course, therefore, becomes one step within a broader pathway of change. Let's imagine a concrete example. Suppose we are developing a digital course on sustainable agriculture for small-scale farmers. If we follow a traditional approach, we might design modules like this: soil management, water conservation, climate adaptation. Learners complete readings, watch videos, and answer quizzes. But if we approach the course through a theory of change lens, we start somewhere else. We begin with the long-term outcome. For example, small-scale farmers adopt climate-resilient agricultural practices that improve food security. Now we ask, what must happen before this outcome becomes possible? Farmers need to understand climate risks. They need practical knowledge about techniques. They need to see examples that work in their context. They need opportunities to experiment and reflect. They need networks where knowledge can be shared, and they need access to local resources or support systems. Now, suddenly the role of a digital course becomes much clearer. The course is not the end goal. The course is part of a learning ecosystem that supports these changes. Instead of designing the course simply as a sequence of information units, we begin designing learning experiences that support these change pathways. For example, discussion forums where farmers share experiences, problem-based activities where learners analyze real challenges, digital storytelling where farmers document experiments, collaborative networks where participants learn from each other. In this way, the course becomes a space for collective learning rather than a static information repository. And this connects strongly with the principles of education for sustainable development. ESD research emphasizes that sustainability learning is not only about knowledge transfer. It requires social learning processes where people explore problems together, reflect on perspectives, and develop shared understandings. This is particularly important because sustainability challenges are complex. Issues like climate change or biodiversity loss cannot be solved through technical knowledge alone. They require systems thinking, collaboration, and innovation. Digital learning environments can play an important role here. When designed well, they can create spaces where learners connect across institutions, regions, and communities. They can enable knowledge exchange between practitioners. They can support collaborative inquiry around real world problems. And they can help create networks of practice that continue beyond the course itself. But again, this only happens when courses are designed with a clear understanding of how change happens. This is why theory of change thinking is increasingly used in development and sustainability education. It helps organizations move beyond the logic of short term projects and instead think about long term impact. According to the Keystone Guide on Theory of Change, the approach helps organizations map the relationships between activities, outcomes, and long term goals, making it easier to understand how actions contribute to social change. It also helps identify the different actors involved in change processes, because sustainable change rarely happens through one organization alone. It usually emerges from a network of actors working together, and digital learning environments can help connect these actors. This is particularly relevant in the context of global sustainability challenges. Many digital courses today are not limited to a single institution or country. They often bring together participants from different regions and professional contexts, and this diversity can become a powerful learning resource. Participants share experiences, they compare challenges, they explore alternative solutions. In this way, digital courses can become learning networks rather than isolated educational interventions. But again, this only works when the course design intentionally supports these processes. And that brings us back to theory of change. When course designers use a theory of change, they start thinking about questions like what kinds of learning experiences are needed to support the outcomes we want? What types of collaboration should the course enable? What kinds of reflection or experimentation should learners engage in? How will learners apply what they learn in real contexts? And perhaps most importantly, how will we know if change is actually happening? In theory of change language, these become indicators of success. These are observable signs that progress is being made. For example, indicators might include teachers implementing projects, farmers adopting new practices, community groups initiating actions, participants continuing collaboration beyond the course. These indicators help educators move beyond simply measuring course participation. Instead, they begin measuring learning impact. And that is an important shift. In sustainability education, the real goal is action and transformation. So, as you continue designing your own digital courses, I encourage you to keep returning to these questions. What is the long term change? What intermediate changes need to happen? How can the learning activities in your course support those changes? And how will you recognize whether the course is actually contributing to them? These questions shift design from content delivery to impact oriented design. And in the context of sustainability education, that shift is essential. Digital technologies give us incredible opportunities to connect learners, share knowledge, and support collaboration across the world. But technology alone does not create meaningful learning. Meaningful learning emerges when digital tools are embedded within designs that support inquiry, dialogue, and action. And the theory of change can help guide that process. It helps us keep sight of the bigger picture. It reminds us that courses are not isolated events, they are part of broader systems. Digital learning can become a catalyst for the kinds of transformations ESD seeks to support. So, as you move forward with designing your digital courses, try this small experiment. Before writing your next module, pause for a moment and write down one sentence, just one, Complete this sentence. If this course succeeds, the world will be different because that single sentence may become the beginning of your own theory of change. And from there, the design of your course can begin to take shape in a much deeper and more meaningful way. Thank you for joining this exploration of theory of change in digital learning.